This video was recorded before the Cincinnati Bengals Buffalo Bills game. This video was recorded before the Damar Hamlin injury. There's nothing I can say at this point to add to the conversation. There's nothing that we can do other than keep him in our thoughts and prayers. I'm going to link his GoFundMe in the description of this video if anybody would like to check it out. But that should be it, and let's get into the video.
That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I just spent a very long time updating our dynasty rankings for this offseason, and we have a lot of rookies skyrocketing up these rankings. I even have a player that I know is going to be skyrocketing up everybody's draft board, even though he did not play this year. Super excited to talk about him. But before we get into anything, make sure you go down there, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, and if you want to check out any of these player props, if you want to get into a draft with us in the live stream, y'all know I just won a decent amount of money on Underdog this year. You can find the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description, in the live chat, in the comment section. When you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. And with promo code FLOCK, you are going to get our 2023 Dynasty Fantasy Football rankings as well, available in damn near every state. But that should be about it. Let's go through. Let's dive into these wide receivers. First guy I don't want to spend too much time on just because we talked about him in an in-depth video last week. Garrett Wilson turned into a monster this season. Specifically at the end of the year, Garrett Wilson was phenomenal. Now, there were a few fantasy football championships that I was relying on Garrett Wilson in, and those, he didn't do great with this past week. I mean, he only had 3 receptions, 18 receiving yards. That's crappy, but even in a horrible game for your fantasy football championship, he's still drawing 11 targets, and now we have a very large sample to look at. Garrett Wilson, his rookie season, had a combined 74 receptions, 130 targets, and over 1,000 receiving yards. This is phenomenal, and if you look at games where Garrett Wilson played with Zach Wilson versus games that Garrett Wilson played without Zach Wilson, it was a night and day difference. If we assume that Zach Wilson missed this entire year, and we know Garrett's not going to have to be dealing with Zach anytime soon, the season could have been even better. But just with what he did, he still made history. If we look at every rookie wide receiver that was drafted in the first round since the year 2000, that averaged what Garrett Wilson did: 7.7 targets per game, 4.7 receptions per game, 65 receiving yards per game. You have Odell Beckham Jr., not sure if you remember him, but at one point he was the #1 overall pick in Dynasty. Jalen Waddle, my most drafted wide receiver this past season. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Just couldn't be more excited about these rookie wide receivers. Obviously, we've already talked about them a ton, though. Let's go over to someone that we haven't spent so much time talking about this season. We talked about him a lot his rookie year. Devonta Smith. With Smith, if y'all remember, people made fun of us for aggressively ranking him. I mean, I loved him, even though people wanted to say, oh, Mason, he's too small. Look at how skinny he is. He is so skinny, blah, blah, blah. Are you freaking kidding me? What I loved about Devonta Smith was the fact that this was one of the best college wide receivers of all time. Like, literally of all time. In 13 games at Alabama in 2020, the man had over 1,800 receiving yards. The man had 117 receptions and 23 receiving touchdowns. That's Alabama. That's the SEC. That's top competition. It was absurd. He accounted for almost 50% of the Alabama passing offense. And if we look at what he did this past year, it was also phenomenal. I mean, if you go and look starting week 2, 80, 169, 17, 87, 44, 23, 22, but 39, 78, 50, 102, 64, and ending the season 126, 113, 115 receiving yards. The man had over 1,100 receiving yards. If we remove week 1 for both A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, their seasons look incredibly similar. It's very surprising how close these two guys were together. Smith ends with 88 receptions, over 1,100 receiving yards. And what is interesting with Devonta Smith is obviously we're all done from a fantasy football standpoint. Scoring isn't really going to impact anybody in their fantasy football leagues right this second. But these teams that are going to the NFL playoffs, a Philadelphia Eagles team that is going to have every single dynasty player in the country watching them, it's going to have Devonta Smith out there. What happens in the NFC Championship if Smith goes out there and has 130 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns? What happens if the Eagles make the Super Bowl and Devonta Smith goes and just has a respectable game of 100 receiving yards, a receiving touchdown, and everybody is talking about it. Everybody is looking at him. He has the potential to continue to rise in dynasty value this offseason, which a lot of these other guys on this list won't. So, I mean, he's already that low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 at an incredibly young age. And I think we can be excited going forward. Now, going over to our next guy, someone that has always been high in our dynasty rankings. He was someone we were buying on the cheap last offseason, this season, and we'll be buying him again this offseason. But I will say he's going to be a lot more expensive now as people prepare for him to come back. Calvin Ridley. Now with Calvin Ridley, I don't even want to look at what he did in 2021. Calvin Ridley in 2021 left the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah, he wasn't great beforehand in the 4-game stretch, blah, blah, blah. But if something was happening in his personal life where you literally had to leave the team, maybe it has something to do with suspension. I don't freaking know. I don't know what was going on in 2021. I feel like we can call that a wash. It was such a small sample. If we go back to the last time we saw Calvin Ridley play football, 2020, Calvin Ridley posted 90 receptions, almost 1,400 receiving yards, and 9 receiving touchdowns. What was incredible about this season is this is an injury-riddled year for Calvin Ridley. Now, that's not going to pop up if you just look at the game log, but you have to get back in that time machine. You have to remember the lower body injuries that Ridley dealt with, knowing that he was leaving games early. Like if we go through and if we filter out every game that Calvin Ridley played fewer than 70% of the snaps in, because keep in mind, if Calvin Ridley's healthy, he's playing over 70% of the snaps. That's going to remove both the Carolina Panthers game on October 29th, as well as the Green Bay Packers game for us. So if we remove those 2 games where Calvin Ridley did not really play, he left early, you're going to get averages for Calvin Ridley, where the last time we saw him play, he averaged over 10 targets a game. He averaged over 100 receiving yards a game. He had 9 touchdowns in 13 games and 6.8 receptions. That season, the only real wide receivers that put up that kind of production were names like Davante Adams. Like, it's ridiculous. And that was when he was incredibly young. He's still stepping into his prime. And the reason he's actually moving up my dynasty rankings, even though we already had him very high, is Lawrence is a lot better than I assumed he was going to be. I'm pretty sure everybody was assuming that Trevor Lawrence was going to get better compared to where he was at his rookie season. I didn't know exactly how much better he could get, but he has drastically exceeded my expectations. I think Lawrence has probably exceeded everybody's expectations. What I love with Ridley as well is not only the fact that he was traded to Jacksonville, but also the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars gave up a pretty penny to get him. If Ridley was traded for a 6th-round pick, I'd sit here and go, okay, well, shows how the NFL values him. We shouldn't be too excited. The fact that a day 2 pick was moved to go get him, it's pretty big news. I'm in on Ridley. Now, going over to Christian Watson, this is an interesting situation in that Watson, of course, over the past few months, has had been someone that you moved up your dynasty rankings. I don't necessarily know if you should be buying him if you don't already have him, though. Because I think we can safely say that nobody's going to want to go out there and sell you Christian Watson. If you're going to buy him, you're going to have to pay up. You're going to have to send a mid-2023 first-round pick to go get him. And while Christian Watson was dominant post-breakout, like he broke out against the Dallas Cowboys on November 13th, and in that game, 4 receptions, 3 receiving touchdowns. And he's had 8 touchdowns since November 13th. And that's including the game against Miami, where he left early with the hip injury after drawing target after target after target. He left in the first half, and the man literally had drawn 8 targets up until that point, and including the Minnesota Vikings game where they score 41, where Christian Watson doesn't really need a play. Remember, a game-time decision. It's including those 2 injury-riddled weeks. If we remove those 2 weeks, you're getting Christian Watson with almost 2 touchdowns a game. You're getting Christian Watson, I mean, as the clear bona fide alpha wide receiver 1 in Green Bay. Now, it's very interesting with this Green Bay situation is a few weeks back, I mean, about 2 months back, I thought the Packers were, I don't want to say completely toast, but I thought the future was very up in the air. When the Packers were going down an ugly road, I was thinking, okay, well, maybe Rodgers is in San Francisco next year. Maybe Rodgers is a New York Jet. Maybe this is a team that feels like they can't compete and they start moving off of options like Aaron Jones to save $11 million. We really didn't know the direction of this Green Bay Packers team. I will say, now that they've won 4 games straight, now that they beat the Bears, now that they beat the Rams, they beat the Dolphins, they beat Minnesota, I'm not going to be surprised when they win this week and they're in the NFL playoffs. I think you're more likely to have Christian Watson with Aaron Rodgers next season. And obviously that's what you're wanting. Even if Aaron Rodgers isn't the quarterback that he was before, he's still going to be a better option than 90% of other outcomes that Christian Watson could find himself in 2023. So this little win streak for Watson, probably a pretty good thing for his long-term situation. Now, going over to another rookie, we're going to be looking at Jahan Dotson, who had a nice little 3-game stretch to end off here, where against the Giants both weeks, he scores a touchdown. One of those weeks, he goes over 100 receiving yards. Against the 49ers, I mean, he has another touchdown, 9 targets. Past week against Cleveland, I mean, obviously, everybody and their mom was talking about this. But why the hell did Carson Wentz start? They throw Wentz out there. Clearly, this team cares about their quarterback. Clearly, they wanted Taylor Heineke in here. They don't want to play for Carson Wentz. Washington does absolutely nothing. So while Jahan Dotson was an impressive prospect, while he had a very strong end to the season coming back from that hamstring injury, I do want to be realistic and say I don't see where this quarterback situation goes. Because if I'm going to pull this up right now, it's not like Washington is going to have a shot at getting a top quarterback. It's not like they're going to be able to go out there and get Bryce Young, get CJ Stroud. He's going to Chicago. But with Washington, they are currently sitting, I mean, at 7-8-1. They're going to be outside the top 10 draft picks. What free agent quarterback are they going to, are they just going to end up with another bridge quarterback? Another guy just like Carson Wentz? Are they going to end up with Taylor Heineke? Regardless, even if we don't know exactly who the quarterback's going to be next year, it will at least be better than Wentz or the same as Wentz. I don't know what it's going to be. It will be a bad situation. You did have Terry McLaurin signing the contract extension. So I don't want you going out there and valuing Jahan Dotson as if he's Garrett Wilson by any means. Now, our last guy on this list, Jerry Jeudy, is someone that I've seen a lot more excitement from across Dynasty Fantasy Football leagues than you had a month ago. And y'all know, I mean, I've been the world's #1 Courtland Sutton hater for God knows how long now. I mean, I feel like we built a brand upon hating on Courtland Sutton. And with that, we said, hell, I mean, Denver's probably all overrated, but Jerry Jeudy is the wide receiver 1 here. If you want a guy, go get Jeudy. He's younger and better. So I would love to come out here and go, oh, yeah, Jerry Jeudy skyrocketing up. Jerry Jeudy's the best. In reality, I just kind of wanted to bring him up saying, I see that he is skyrocketing up, keep, trade, cut draft boards and say, guys, don't overreact. It's clear what happened. You had Courtland Sutton miss a month. Courtland Sutton missed a month of games. You had no KJ Hamler. You had no Tim Patrick. Kendall Hinton missed as well. So if you had no Sutton, Hamler, Patrick, Kendall Hinton, Jerry Jeudy had about a month stretch where he was one of the only top 5 rostered receivers left over here in Denver. It's not going to happen going forward. Those guys will be good to go. All of them are under contract next season. So if you bring in a ton of wide receiver depth into Denver, and we know Russell Wilson is going to be stuck here, it's not like they're going to be able to get out of that contract. I don't see why people are all of a sudden getting so excited with Jerry Jeudy. And this is coming from the guy who's been saying he's better than Courtland Sutton for God knows how long now. So if this opens up a sell high opportunity for you with Jerry Jeudy, I think you have to go ahead and do it. Now, that's all I got for you. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go down there, drop a like on it. Subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you want to get our Dynasty rankings, if you want to check out any of these player props, if you want to get into a draft with us on the live stream, go check out Underdog Fantasy. You can find the link in the description in the comment section. When you sign up for Underdog and use promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100 as well, and available in damn near every state. But thank you. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day, and I'll be good to see you in the video tomorrow.